Have you ever woken up late, spent literally hours scrolling aimlessly on your phone, thought about starting that big project you've been putting off forever, and then just delayed it again? By the end of the day, you're left staring at the ceiling, wondering why you feel completely stuck in the mud while everyone else around you seems to be moving forward. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to visually unpack the fascinating, scientifically backed psychology behind that exact feeling.
And this brings us right to a deeply uncomfortable question. What are you actually doing with your life? I really want to address you directly here because if you frequently feel like you're just watching your own life pass by from the sidelines, I promise you, you are not alone. Our goal today is to give you a structured, visual analysis of exactly why this happens. Now, most productivity gurus out there would look at this behavior, point at it, and simply label it as laziness or a lack of discipline. But psychology, it points to something way more profound and, honestly, much more uncomfortable. You aren't just being lazy. Your mind is actually deploying an active, highly sophisticated psychological defense mechanism to avoid growing up. So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll look at the illusion of the provisional life, understand the eternal boy syndrome, uncover the potential trap, identify 3 common escape patterns, and finally, show you how to actually take control. Let's dive right into our first point, the illusion of the provisional life. You see, people stuck in this cycle, they almost never recognize it at first. If you fit this profile, you probably firmly believe that you're just going through a temporary phase and that your real path is just around the corner. The legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung actually had a name for this illusion. He called it the provisional life. Living a provisional life means believing that what you're doing right now isn't your actual life. You treat your current job as temporary just to pay the bills. Your apartment is a mess because, hey, your real house comes later, right? Even your relationships are never 100% committed because you're totally convinced the ideal person just hasn't arrived yet. You end up treating your entire existence as a mere waiting room. And because everything feels so temporary, you never fully commit to anything. You become a spectator in your own life. You sit up in the bleachers, quietly watching others around you work, fail, build, and rise. And secretly, your mind creates this illusion that you're somehow above them, that they're all trapped in the system while you await some special destiny. But here's the harsh truth. You haven't chosen the sidelines out of freedom. You chose them because the bleachers are safe. Watching is always safer than participating. That takes us to our second point, the eternal boy syndrome. This isn't just a quirky phase, it's a deeply recognized clinical concept. It's a persistent immaturity that haunts men well into their 30s, 40s, and even 50s. Carl Jung used a specific Latin term to describe this state, puer aeternus, which translates to the eternal boy. On the outside, you look like a fully grown adult, but psychologically, you remain an adolescent. You're the guy with immense potential who just never quite gets into gear. Honestly, understanding this term is incredibly validating because it proves your struggle is a recognized psychological phenomenon, not just some personal moral failure on your part. So, how does this syndrome actually manifest in your daily choices? Well, the eternal boy generally avoids making specific career choices because committing to one path means letting go of the potential to do everything else. By never fully dedicating yourself to a goal, you never have to face failure. Your dreams remain absolutely perfect and flawlessly untested in your head. Because, let's face it, a dream that's never tested can never fail. Which brings us to part 3, the potential check. So, where does this overwhelming need to protect your potential even come from? Maria Louise von Franz, who was a brilliant close colleague of Jung, identified what we might call the gifted kid pipeline. A surprising majority of men in this state were actually the most talented kids in their class. They learned fast, they were praised constantly, and they were labeled as geniuses with potential. They basically built their entire sense of self-worth around simply being special. But here's the core shock. Adulthood doesn't care about potential. The real world mercilessly demands actual results. And when the eternal boy finally discovers this, it feels like a direct existential threat to his ego. To protect the ego from the terrifying reality that maybe, just maybe, they aren't that special after all, the mind activates an automatic defense mechanism. And we commonly refer to this mechanism as procrastination. It's not laziness, guys. It's a meticulously crafted shield designed to keep your ego perfectly intact. Now let's explore part 4, the 3 escape patterns. Now that we know why the mind builds this shield, we really need to look at how it operates. These traps are disguised so well they seem perfectly normal.
First up is entertainment. You tell yourself you're just relaxing after a hard day, but in reality, when life pressures you, you dive into gaming or endless scrolling, not to rest, but to silence the alarm of your own life. In the virtual world, you're a hero, but when the screen goes dark, your unlived reality is still sitting there waiting. Second is commitment terror. Disguised as being careful, the moment real responsibilities arise in a project or a relationship, you retreat. You let others carry the burden of decisions and bills while you remain the one being cared for. And third, the victim mentality. You disguise giving up as simply pointing out an unfair system. And yeah, the market is hard and life absolutely isn't fair, but using those real flaws as your only excuse to never take action, that just means you're surrendering all of your personal agency.
Finally, part 5, how to actually take control. Look, recognizing yourself in those traps can feel really heavy, but guilt is only going to paralyze you further. Curing the eternal boy syndrome doesn't require a magic pill. It requires a massive paradigm shift. Here are 3 actionable steps to change your trajectory from escaping life to actively building a foundation. Redefine growing up, embrace the ordinary, and intentionally expose yourself to failure. Let's break these down.
First, you absolutely must redefine growing up. The man-child sees responsibility as a prison. You need to flip that and see it as the necessary structure that actually gives shape to your dreams. A talented writer without the discipline to sit and write, they'll just take that talent to the grave. Second, embrace the ordinary without shame. Wash the dishes, pay your bills on time, show up to a normal job with seriousness. These small, daily acts pull your mind right out of the clouds and ground you in reality. Finally, you have to intentionally expose yourself to failure. Send that resume out knowing you might be rejected. Ask your boss for honest feedback. Character isn't formed in your imagination. It is formed when you literally fall down in the real world, get back up, and keep going. To truly understand the stakes of this transformation, we have to look at this absolutely devastating quote from Carl Jung. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. If you continue living on the surface, endlessly waiting for that perfect moment that is never, ever going to arrive, what you lose isn't just time. You lose the capacity to truly exist in your relationships, in your choices, and in the very life that is passing you by right now. Listen, there is no magical moment that is going to pull you out of the stands. There is only the decision to step onto the field, even if you feel completely unready, even if you are terrified, and even if you know for sure you're going to make mistakes. So I leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. Are you going to stay in the bleachers, or are you finally ready to play the game?